paid attention to the cardboard box, dumped behind the rusted dumpster in the alley behind Karen Market. Not even the grocer who stepped past it daily, nor the boys who threw old mango seeds there after lunch, laughing and running off without a glance. It was just another forgotten corner of a big city, damp with the smell of rotten vegetables and the occasional scurry of rats. But inside that box, curled up so tightly it looked like a bundle of rags, was a tiny, weak puppy no bigger than a slipper. Its ribs poking through its frail skin, its breath shallow and almost invisible. Rain had started to drizzle that early morning, and water dripped into the box through a torn flap, chilling the poor creature's already cold body, making its tiny paws tremble slightly as it gave the softest, almost inaudible whimper, a sound so faint that it could have easily been mistaken for wind brushing over plastic, if it hadn't been for the woman who walked past, stopped, and turned back because something didn't feel right. Her name was Arashi, a soft-spoken woman in her late 20s who had just left her nursing shift at the city hospital and was walking the longer way home to clear her mind of the emergencies, the beeping monitors, and the echo of pain she saw nightly in the trauma ward. Yet, even after all she had seen, the sight that met her when she gently peeked into that soggy cardboard broke her already tired heart. A soaking wet puppy, its eyes barely open, gasping softly, its body trembling not just from the cold, but from a place of abandonment that no living being should ever have to feel. She didn't pause to think, didn't wait to call anyone. She just gently picked it up with her scarf, wrapping the pup close to her chest, like it was the most precious thing she had ever held, whispering softly, "It's okay now, little one, I've got you," and rushed straight to the 24-hour veterinary clinic 2 blocks away, ignoring the rain, the stairs, even the ache in her back from working all night. Every part of her moved for this small soul, as if something ancient inside her had awakened and chosen this moment. The vet, an old, bespectacled man named Dr. Khanna, looked grim as he examined the pup. Hypothermia, severe dehydration, signs of malnourishment, and a possible infection. But Arashi's unwavering gaze and calm insistence bought the puppy a fighting chance. She stayed by its side the entire night, refusing to sleep, her fingers gently stroking its paw as IV fluid slowly entered its fragile veins. And sometime just before dawn, the puppy stirred, opened one eye more fully, and let out a sound, small, raspy, but unmistakably alive. From that moment forward, Arashi named him Veer, meaning brave, because she believed only the brave survive what he had. And slowly, with each passing week, Veer proved her right. He gained strength, learned to eat solid food, started walking wobbly on his own, and eventually began greeting her with excited yips every evening she returned from the hospital, tail wagging furiously. His eyes filled with gratitude that words could never express. Months passed, and Veer grew into a sleek, alert, and surprisingly intelligent dog with sharp instincts, expressive eyes, and a loyalty to Arashi that could only be described as sacred. It was during one of their walks to the nearby field that a police officer named Rajat, who often saw them from his patrol car, stopped one day to say, "You know, ma'am, that dog's got the kind of attention and discipline we look for in K9 units." And although Arashi smiled politely, the seed had been planted, and weeks later, after some encouragement and thought, she enrolled Veer in a basic obedience course, more out of curiosity than ambition. But the trainers there were stunned. Veer wasn't just obedient. He was uncannily perceptive, able to pick up advanced commands with minimal repetition, quickly learning scent tracking, obstacle courses, and controlled aggression. Eventually, the instructors suggested she consider police K9 training, and with Arashi's support and Dr. Khanna's blessing, Veer was enrolled in an intensive program where he outshone even pedigreed working dogs, earning the admiration of handlers and officers alike, eventually being accepted into the city's police K9 squad as a full-time service dog. His first assignment came on a winter morning when an Amber Alert was issued for a missing child in the outskirts near the railway yard, and while others combed through sheds and shacks, it was Veer who, with nose low to the ground and ears alert, led his handler deep into a tangled brush where the child, unconscious but alive, had fallen into a hidden ditch. From that day, Veer's name echoed in police halls and radio calls, a hero born from the shadows. Yet no matter how decorated he became, he always returned to Arashi on his off-duty days, leaping into her arms like he was still that trembling pup in the scarf, sleeping curled beside her on the floor, or sometimes resting his head in her lap as she studied her nursing books, as if grounding himself in the warmth that had saved him. But fate is never content with quiet heroes, and it wasn't long before Veer would face the moment that would define his legend forever. A string of robberies had shaken the city's old bazaar, and one afternoon, a call came in about a hostage situation at the central school, where 27 children were trapped by a man with explosives. Veer and his unit were deployed, and under extreme tension, he was sent inside with a camera vest and comms device, his handler whispering guiding words, his paws silent on tiled floors as he moved toward the suspect unnoticed. His eyes scanned the room, ears perked for distress, and upon identifying the suspect pacing erratically near a cluster of frightened children, Veer made the decision no one expected. He barked once, drawing attention, then charged, knocking the man down and dislodging the trigger device, allowing officers to rush in. There were injuries, some broken glass, and a lot of fear, but not a single child was lost. Veer had taken a minor injury to his side, but refused to whimper, even as medics rushed in. And once he was stable, the mayor himself declared him a public hero, even awarding him a custom medal for bravery. But sat through all the newspaper stories, TV interviews, and the moment where Veer was invited to sit in the governor's chair for a ceremonial photo. He stayed humble, still running to greet Arushi at the gate, licking her hands with joy, sometimes curling at her feet when she felt low and overwhelmed by her own trauma from the hospital. Until one day, when Arushi, after noticing a sudden weight loss and lack of appetite, took him to Dr. Khanna, who, after a few tests, gave her a diagnosis that felt like a blade: an aggressive form of canine lymphoma, already in its late stages. Treatment was possible, but it wouldn't guarantee more than a few months. And so began their final chapter, not of loss, but of honoring life. Veer continued his duty as long as he could, refusing to retire fully, insisting on short patrols and occasional visits to the school, where the same children he once saved would pet him gently, their fingers careful around the patch on his side. Eventually, on a rainy evening eerily similar to the one when he was found, Veer lay beside Arushi on the floor of their home, his breathing slow but peaceful, his eyes fixed on her, as if memorizing every line of her face. One last time, she whispered through tears, "You've done enough, my brave boy. You can rest now." And with that, Veer took one final soft breath, his heart still, and his body still wrapped in the same red scarf that once saved his life in a forgotten alleyway. A scarf Arushi never stopped carrying. News of his passing spread far and wide, and the city held a silent candlelight vigil under the moonlight in his honor, led by the children of the school, the officers he once served with, and most importantly, Arushi, who never let the world forget that once upon a time, a weak, discarded puppy had become a legend, not through bloodlines or training alone, but through love, second chances, and the incredible bond between a woman and her dog. Under the moonlit sky dot, in the days following the news broadcast of Rex's heroic capture of the armed suspect during the school hostage crisis, the entire town had turned its gaze toward the dog who once whimpered at death's edge, left to perish in a ditch by unknown hands, now crowned as a savior in the community's eyes. The footage had gone viral, not because it was dramatic, though it certainly was, but because it was heartfelt. A sleek but scarred German shepherd with a gaze as calm as the moonlight pinning down a gunman to the ground until help arrived, then limping silently back to his handler, Officer Maria Langdon, whose tears fell unashamed on Rex's fur in the aftermath. The bond between the two was something the camera couldn't fully capture, but it radiated from every frame, every wag of his tail, every glance exchanged between them. Yet even as accolades poured in, a medal from the mayor, a custom harness gifted by a philanthropist dog gear company, and a feature on national television, something in Rex's eyes remained quietly haunted. Maria noticed it during their evening walks. He'd freeze momentarily under bridges, or when they passed alleyways, he'd stiffen near dumpsters, or when sirens blared in the distance. His trauma, buried under training and love, had not vanished, only learned to coexist. Maria, who had once rescued him as a frail and discarded pup covered in mange and trembling from fever, remembered the first time he barked in his sleep, waking from a nightmare so vivid his paws scratched the air. As if fending off invisible demons, she had knelt beside him then, whispering, "It's over now, you're safe," not knowing that someday he would be the one keeping others safe. The department began training Rex for specialized search and rescue missions, not just crowd control or suspect apprehension, but locating missing children, elderly with dementia, hikers lost in the wild. He thrived. But it was a new case that would change everything. A case that started not with a 911 call, but a trembling girl who walked into the station, clutching a crumpled photograph and whispering through chattering teeth, "Please, I think my brother's been taken." The girl, Lily, was only 8. Her brother, Tyler, 11, hadn't come home from school the day before. Their parents, often absent and unreliable, hadn't even noticed. But Lily had. She remembered Tyler saying a strange man had offered him candy near the woods. She'd begged him not to go. No one believed her, except Maria and Rex. The boy had been missing for over 20 hours. The first 48 were critical. The department launched a search, but the woods stretched for miles. A labyrinth of trails, old barns, dried-up creeks, and forgotten hunting cabins. It was Rex who caught the scent on Tyler's worn hoodie. It was Rex who led them through mud and bramble, past where the official search teams had given up. It was Rex who halted at an old well behind an abandoned farmhouse, ears pricked, tail still, nose trembling with certainty. Maria called out. No answer. Then she heard it, the faintest, almost inaudible thud, like someone weakly tapping against wood. Rex barked once, sharp and commanding, and began digging furiously. They uncovered a trapdoor beneath it, a hidden cellar. Tyler was there, bound, but alive, dehydrated, crying. He'd been locked up by a man now fleeing across county lines. The capture came hours later, but Tyler's rescue made headlines again. And this time, the town held a parade for Rex. But what truly mattered wasn't the parade, the medals, or the TV spots. It was when Tyler visited Maria's home days later, clutching Rex tightly and whispering, "Thank you for not forgetting me." That night, Maria sat on her porch beside Rex, who rested with his head on her lap, watching fireflies dance in the dusk. She spoke softly. "You're more than a hero, Rex. You're hope. You're what people hold on to when the world is falling apart." He looked up at her, eyes like amber pools lit by the moon, and licked her hand. Retirement was coming soon, not because Rex was old, but because Maria wanted him to live out his remaining years in peace, surrounded by love, not gunshots or sirens. She adopted a new pup, Scout, and Rex took to training him. Not in the way humans train dogs, but in the subtle, dignified way of elders showing the young the meaning of bravery, loyalty, and grace. Scout learned quickly, mirroring Rex's calm demeanor. The department allowed Maria to start a training program for rescue dogs, using Rex's story as a cornerstone. Not just teaching obedience and agility, but healing. Veterans with PTSD began volunteering. Children who'd lost pets came to bond. The kennel Rex once trembled in as a pup became a sanctuary now, renamed Rex's Refuge. It became a place where discarded souls were given a second chance, just like Rex was. And the final chapter, though soft and quiet, was no less powerful. One winter night, as snow blanketed the town and Scout lay curled by the fireplace, Rex went to Maria one last time. He rested his head against her knee, sighing deeply, and gazed into her eyes. She knew. She held him close all night, whispering stories, memories, gratitude. By dawn, he was gone, not with whimpers or fear, but with peace, a life fulfilled beyond measure. The town mourned. Flags flew at half-mast, but his legacy lived in every bark of a rescued dog, every laugh of a child saved, every beating heart that once had no hope. And Maria, standing at the edge of the training field, looked up at the moon and whispered, "Run free, my boy. You were never weak. You were always meant to be strong, and now you're legend." The wind carried her words, soft like fur, eternal like love, into the starlit sky, where a hero's spirit ran wild. And finally, home the world didn't stop turning the day Rex passed, but for those who knew him, or even just knew of him, it felt like the earth had paused to bow its head for a moment, honoring the silent sacrifice of a life that had given everything and asked for nothing in return. News of Rex's passing spread quickly through the small town and beyond, each person who had heard his story feeling the ache of loss as if they had known him personally. Children left handwritten notes outside the police station. Strangers brought flowers and dog treats to the gate of Rex's Refuge, placing them under a framed photo of the old German shepherd who had once stared down death, but spent his final years embodying strength, warmth, and second chances. But perhaps nowhere was his absence felt more deeply than in the quiet corners of Maria's home. In the empty spot near the fireplace where Rex used to sleep, in the silences that once had the sound of his soft breathing, Scout, the young pup Rex had trained, would occasionally go to the door at night and wait, as if expecting Rex to return from one more patrol shift. Maria would sit beside him, eyes moist, whispering stories into the stillness. One of the first things she did after Rex's passing was establish the Rex Valor Foundation, a nonprofit that funded training and rehabilitation for rescue dogs, and partnered with shelters to pair trained dogs with veterans, survivors of abuse, and children with special needs. What began as a local initiative quickly drew national attention. Donations flowed in from every corner, not because of flashy marketing, but because of the sincerity behind it, the undeniable emotional truth of Rex's story. Testimonials flooded their inbox. A firefighter whose PTSD nightmares eased after adopting a dog trained through the foundation. A boy with autism who said his dog understood him without needing words. And a teenage girl who'd been on the verge of giving up before meeting her gentle Labrador companion. Each letter was a seed of healing. Each life changed, a whisper of Rex's name carried forward. Maria never once saw Rex as just a dog. He had been her partner, her family, her compass through the darkest moments. There were times, in her loneliest hours, where his presence was the only thing that anchored her to hope. Now, she watched that same hope blossom in the lives of others, not in grand gestures, but in small miracles. The day the Rex Valor Foundation opened a new wing dedicated entirely to therapy dogs, Maria was handed a guest book to sign. She paused and instead wrote a letter, one not addressed to donors or press, but to Rex. "You never knew the full scope of your strength, old boy," it read. "You didn't see how your courage echoed into lives far from the battlefield or the woods. But I do, and I always will." That letter now sits in a glass case in the Foundation's central hall, beside Rex's police badge and the first collar he ever wore. Meanwhile, Scout grew into his own. He wasn't a replica of Rex, nor did Maria want him to be. Scout was playful, eager, and sometimes mischievous. But when duty called, something clicked, a calm resolve, a silent wisdom, as if Rex had passed down more than muscle memory. During a community outreach event one summer, Scout helped locate an elderly woman with Alzheimer's who had wandered into the park's wooded trails. His nose, his instincts, they were sharp, but Maria swore it was something else that led him that day. A presence, a feeling. That night, Scout sat beside the old fireplace, staring up at the moon, and Maria swore she saw the flicker of a silhouette at the edge of her vision. A larger dog, proud, watchful, fading into the shadows. Years passed. Scout eventually retired, and Maria, now older, silver threading through her once jet-black hair, stayed on as director of Rex's refuge. Children would ask her, was Rex real, the hero dog from the books and shows? And she'd smile, pointing to the worn photo on the wall. He was real, and he was everything they say he was, and more. She kept a box of Rex's things tucked safely in her study, the first toy he ever played with, still threadbare, but whole, the blanket he used to drag around the house, a clipping of the newspaper from the day he saved the school. On nights when the world felt heavy, she'd light a candle, wrap herself in that old blanket, and talk to the stars. "You'd be proud," she'd whisper. "Your story didn't end when you left. It began." And in a way, it had. Filmmakers created documentaries about Rex. Schools held essay contests titled "What Courage Means to Me," often inspired by his story. A statue was built in the center of town, not just of a dog, but of a symbol, a reminder that sometimes heroes come on 4 legs from the most broken beginnings. That That statue stood tall during the town's annual Day of the Dog, a festival celebrating rescue stories and raising funds for animal welfare. Every child who passed by would rub the statue's nose for luck, and every time Maria saw it, her heart filled not with sadness, but with quiet, profound joy. She had saved Rex once, but it was Rex who saved her 1,000 times after. The final winter of Maria's life came gently. She passed away peacefully in her sleep, Scout curled at her feet. But her legacy, like Rex's, refused to fade. The foundation was renamed the Langdon Rex Legacy Center. Its mission remained unchanged, to honor the bond between human and dog, to never forget that sometimes, in our darkest moments, it is a paw, not a hand, that reaches in and pulls us into the light. And somewhere, beneath a silver moon and among the rustling leaves, a breeze carries the echo of paw prints. 2 souls, 1 woman, 1 dog, walking together once more, side by side, through fields beyond sorrow, into legends whispered eternally by the wind.